Welcome back, everyone. Today we'll be taking a deep dive into Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group, or as most know it, MUFG. We're going to see if this stock is something you should consider adding to your portfolio.
To get a good look at it, we've gathered information from all sorts of sources, their financials and website, info on some of their acquisitions, all their ESG stuff, even a bit of the history of the company.
Yeah, I think it's really important to look at a company from every angle before, deciding to invest.
Right, exactly.
So let's start with that history, shall we?
Mm.
MUFG was created way back in 2005 through a merger of two pretty big Japanese banks. A year later, they founded MUFG Bank. What's interesting about this is that it's part of the Mitsubishi Keiretsu.
Ah,
This is basically a network of companies that are connected with shared ownership and a big emphasis on working together.
uh
Historically, this kind of structure has provided a lot of stability, and they tend to have this really long-term vision, both of which are pretty appealing to investors.
And that stability has shown up in their recent financials. MUFG has consistently beat what analysts have expected in terms of earnings per share and sales over the past year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they're projected to have sales of about $7.23 billion next quarter, which seems like they're continuing to do well.
That's great to hear for anyone thinking about investing. But let's move past the numbers for a minute. MUFG has also been growing through acquisitions. In 2023, they bought Home Credit for $219 million and Mandala Finance for $465 million.
Yeah, that's right.
The thing about these acquisitions is both of these companies really focus on consumer and SME loans. And a lot of them are in Southeast Asia.
Right.
This area has this rapidly growing middle class. It's a really good market for MUFG to get into.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty calculated move to, diversify their loan portfolio and take advantage of the growth of emerging markets.
For sure.
In addition to all of that, MUFG has also been buying back their own shares. They recently announced plans to buy back 230 million shares and cancel 270 million treasury shares. When they reduce the number of shares that are out there, it can boost earnings per share, which might make the stock look even better to investors.
So it sounds like they are really doing a lot to improve shareholder value. But, it's not all about traditional banking for them either.
Yeah.
They're putting a lot of money into innovation, especially supporting startups. It seems like they've dedicated around $900 billion to this.
Right.
That includes investments in Asian digital companies and funding through this thing called Mars Growth Capital. What really struck me was their goal to get the market cap of the startups they support to 20 trillion
Wow.
by fiscal year 2026, which is really ambitious.
Yeah, it definitely shows that they're not just putting money in, they're really trying to help innovation grow in different industries.
For sure.
And their efforts have been recognized too. They got the highest ranking out of all the financial services groups in something called the Startup Friendly Scoring 2023, put out by the Japan Business Federation. That just goes to show that they're really serious about fostering innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's talk about something that seems a bit out of left field, the space industry. MUFG has been strategically investing in this sector,
Yeah,
which, by the way, is expected to hit a value of 90 trillion yen by 2030.
their investments in companies like Space One, Astroscale Holdings, Sierra Space Corporation, and Satellite Data Services Co. Ltd. definitely show they're committed to getting into a high growth and cutting edge sector.
Yeah, all of those companies do different things in the space industry, like launching small satellites with rockets, removing space debris, and building space transportation systems.
It really looks like they are trying to get involved in a bunch of different parts of the space industry.
Right, it seems like they want to take advantage of the potential there. But, they aren't just reaching for the stars. They're also very involved in regional revitalization efforts here in Japan.
Yeah, that's right. Their initiatives like MUIC Kansai, for example, highlight a commitment to sustainable growth and social impact in their home country.
So along with their global goals, they're working to improve the lives of local communities in Japan.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about MUFG's ESG environmental, social, and governance factors. This is really important for investors who want their investments to match their values.
For sure. MUFG has a strong and very public commitment to ESG principles. Their carbon neutrality declaration lays out their goal to reach net zero emissions for their entire financing portfolio by 2050 and for their operations by 2030. And they've joined organizations like the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero and the Net Zero Banking Alliance to show they're serious.
It sounds like they are going above and beyond just making promises.
Yeah, they're not just talking the talk.
They have a sustainable finance goal of 35 trillion yen for green and social financings between 2019 and 2030. They've also written a bunch of articles about how they're promoting clean tech and navigating the changing world of ESG disclosures. Their actions suggest a genuine commitment to ESG, which is super important for attracting investors these days.
Absolutely. Now, let's take a look at their financials. MUFG has a really solid track record. They've consistently beat what analysts expected for earnings per share and sales over the past few quarters.
Yeah, that's really impressive.
It suggests they're a well-managed and profitable business, and their sales projections for next quarter are about $7.23 billion. It looks like they're going to keep this momentum going.
It sounds really promising.
Hmm.
But, we got to look at both sides. What are the pros and cons of investing in MUFG?
On the plus side, MUFG is very financially stable. They have a proven track record of growth through acquisitions. They're dedicated to innovation and have a clear commitment to ESG principles. All these things make them attractive, especially for long-term investors who want both growth and stability.
Makes sense.
But of course, there are risks with every investment. The financial sector is always vulnerable to what's going on in the global economy. Things like interest rates and regulations changing can impact MUFG's profits.
That's a good point. So do you think MUFG is a good fit for someone's portfolio?
That's a question only each individual can answer. It all depends on their investment goals, how much risk they're comfortable with, and what their overall portfolio looks like.
That's fair. Well, we've given a pretty good overview of MUFG today. We talked about their history, financial performance, acquisitions, their innovation pipeline, ESG initiatives, and even briefly touched on the good and bad points. Next time, we'll look closer at their dividend policy, their share buyback program, and we'll dig deeper into their innovation efforts and valuation.
We'll also discuss the potential downsides of investing in MUFG and really analyze whether their stock is a good fit for your portfolio. Be sure to join us for part 2 as we continue to explore MUFG.
Welcome back to our deep dive on MUFG.
Now let's dig a little deeper into some of the things that could really affect your decision to invest, starting with their dividend policy.
Okay.
How does MUFG stack up when it comes to giving back to shareholders through dividends?
Well, MUFG has a pretty solid history of paying dividends, so it might be a good choice for investors who are looking for income.
They've consistently shared their profits with their shareholders.
We briefly mentioned their share buyback program earlier. Could you expand on what that means for potential investors?
Sure. Share buybacks are often seen as a good sign. It usually means the company thinks its stock is undervalued right now and wants to increase its value. In this case, MUFG's decision to buy back those 230 million shares and cancel the 270 million treasury shares seems like a move to, benefit those shareholders.
Right, exactly. MUFG has a huge global network. How does that play into their overall strategy and their potential to grow?
Their network is definitely a big plus. It gives them access to tons of different markets and a much larger customer base. This lets them spread out their revenue streams and jump on growth opportunities in different parts of the world.
Their strong presence in Asia seems particularly important.
Oh, absolutely. Asia has some of the fastest growing economies in the world, and MUFG has deep connections in the region, especially in places like China, India, and Southeast Asia. They're in a great position to benefit from that continued growth.
Now let's talk more about their innovation pipeline. Besides investing in startups, what are they doing to stay ahead of the game?
Well, they're investing heavily in digital transformation and fintech. They're creating new mobile banking platforms to make things easier and better for their customers.
Okay.
And they're looking into using blockchain to make transactions more efficient, secure, and transparent.
What about artificial intelligence? Are they doing anything with that?
MUFG knows AI could change everything. They're using it to improve customer service, streamline their own processes, and even find new business opportunities.
It sounds like they're taking a multifaceted approach to innovation.
Right, they're covering all their bases.
Now let's get to the nitty-gritty. Valuation. Is MUFG stock a good buy at its current price?
Valuation is tricky. There's no simple answer. It depends on a lot of things, like their financials, growth potential, risk profile, and even what's happening in the overall market.
So how does their valuation compare to similar companies in the financial sector?
If you look at traditional valuation metrics, like the price-to-earnings ratio, MUFG seems to be trading at a discount compared to other major international banks.
Interesting.
It might mean their stock is undervalued and has room to grow, which could be good for investors.
So it could be a good deal.
Potentially, but it's important to remember that valuation is just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, of course.
You need to do your homework and look at everything before making any investment decisions.
Okay, good advice.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the potential downsides of investing in MUFG. What are some risks investors should keep in mind?
Well, one risk for any financial institution is economic downturns.
Yeah, makes sense.
When the economy takes a hit, banks' profits can suffer, and that can cause stock prices to fall.
What about regulations?
The financial services industry is heavily regulated, and any changes, whether here in Japan or internationally, can impact MUFG's business and profits. Investors need to be aware of that risk.
Then there's competition.
Oh, absolutely. MUFG is up against other big global banks, not to mention new fintech companies.
So they need to keep innovating and adapting to stay competitive.
Exactly. It's a constant challenge.
All right, so the big question is, should you invest in MUFG?
That's a decision you have to make based on your own situation, your goals, your risk tolerance, and your overall investment strategy.
We've tried to give you a good look at MUFG, showing you their strengths, their weaknesses, and what the future might hold.
Now, you need to decide if this financial giant fits into your investment plans.
Now, let's turn our attention to something investors are increasingly focusing on: MUFG's commitment to ESG principles.
MUFG has really embraced ESG. They've woven these principles into their operations and investment decisions.
Okay.
They've set ambitious targets for reducing their environmental impact, supporting sustainable finance, and being socially responsible.
Those goals align with what a lot of investors are looking for these days. Companies that are helping build a more sustainable world.
Exactly. And ESG rating agencies have recognized MUFG's efforts, which makes investors feel even more confident.
Can you give us some specific examples of their ESG initiatives?
Sure. They've committed to achieving net zero emissions in their finance portfolio by 2050 and in their own operations by 2030. That means aligning their lending and investments with the Paris Agreement and adopting sustainable practices in all their offices and branches around the world.
It sounds like they're taking real action.
Yeah, they are, and it goes beyond just environmental concerns.
Okay.
They also have programs to promote diversity and inclusion, human rights, and economic development in local communities. They even have a dedicated sustainable finance team to support things like renewable energy projects, green infrastructure, and other sustainable businesses.
It's great to see a global financial institution like MUFG taking concrete steps to address these important issues.
It really is.
Now, let's circle back to their global network. It seems like their extensive reach gives them a significant edge.
Oh, absolutely. It lets them diversify their revenue streams, access new markets, and attract talent from all over the world.
And their strong presence in Asia, one of the fastest growing regions, is a major asset.
For sure. They have such strong relationships with businesses and governments in key Asian markets that they're well positioned to ride the wave of continued economic growth there.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's dig a little deeper into their innovation efforts. MUFG is making big investments in digital transformation, fintech, and other cutting-edge technologies.
They know the financial services industry is changing rapidly, and they have to innovate to stay in the game.
Right.
They're creating new mobile banking platforms to provide more personalized experiences for their customers.
It's interesting.
They're also exploring blockchain to improve efficiency, security, and transparency in financial transactions.
And are they using AI?
Absolutely. They're using it to enhance customer service, automate processes, and identify new opportunities. All of this is to ensure they remain a leader in financial services and meet the changing needs of their customers.
It sounds like they're on the right track. Now let's touch on valuation again. As we mentioned earlier, MUFG seems potentially undervalued based on traditional metrics.
Right. And that could be a good opportunity for investors looking for long-term growth.
But remember, everyone, valuation is just one factor to consider.
You got it.
Always do your research and due diligence before investing in anything.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about the potential risks of investing in MUFG.
Okay, let's hear them.
One of the biggest risks for any financial institution is economic downturns.
Yeah, recessions and financial crises can really hurt a bank's profits, and that can send their stock price down.
That's right. Another concern is all the regulations in the financial services industry.
Ah, yes, regulations. They can be a real headache.
Any changes in those regulations, whether domestically or internationally, can affect MUFG's operations and profits.
And then there's always the competition to worry about.
Absolutely. MUFG is facing competition from big, well-established banks, as well as those new fintech companies popping up everywhere.
They've got to stay agile and keep innovating if they want to maintain their market share.
You're telling me it's a tough market out there.
But from what we've discussed, it seems like MUFG has a pretty good track record of adapting and staying ahead.
They do. Their stability, their commitment to innovation, and their strong financial performance suggest they're well equipped to handle these challenges.
So, should you invest in MUFG? That's the million-dollar question.
It is, and only you can answer that.
We've tried to give you a comprehensive overview of MUFG, highlighting their strengths, challenges, and future prospects.
Now it's up to you to decide if this financial powerhouse aligns with your investment strategy.
Before we wrap up our deep dive into MUFG, let's revisit their dividend policy. This is something that's really important for investors who are looking for income.
Right, and MUFG has a history of paying dividends, which shows they're committed to returning value to their shareholders.
That's good to hear.
But it's important to remember that those dividend payments aren't guaranteed.
Right, of course.
They can change based on the company's performance and other factors.
So investors need to look at MUFG's past dividend payments and their current financial situation to see if those dividends are likely to continue.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about that share buyback program again. It's generally a good sign for investors.
Yeah, it shows that MUFG believes in their future and wants to boost shareholder value.
Exactly. Buybacks reduce the number of shares out there, which can potentially increase earnings per share and make the stock more attractive.
Makes sense.
But it's also important to think about whether buybacks are the best way to use their capital.
Right. They could also invest in growth opportunities or reduce debt.
Exactly. Now let's dive back into MUFG's global network. That vast reach across so many regions gives them a real competitive edge.
It lets them diversify their revenue, tap into new markets, and attract talent from all over.
And their strong presence in Asia, one of the fastest growing regions, is a huge plus.
They're well positioned to benefit from that growth because of their strong relationships with businesses and governments in key Asian markets.
Their focus on Asia is definitely a key driver of their future growth prospects.
Now let's take a closer look at their innovation efforts. They're putting a lot of resources into digital transformation, fintech, and other cutting-edge technologies.
They know they have to innovate to keep up with the rapid changes in the financial services industry.
It's all about staying ahead of the curve.
Right. They're developing new mobile banking platforms to give their customers a more convenient and personalized experience.
And they're exploring blockchain to make financial transactions more efficient, secure, and transparent.
They're also using AI to improve customer service, automate processes, and find new opportunities.
It sounds like they're taking a comprehensive approach to innovation.
Absolutely. They want to ensure they remain a leader in financial services and meet the evolving needs of their customers.
Okay, let's revisit the topic of valuation one last time. As we mentioned earlier, MUFG seems to be potentially undervalued based on traditional metrics.
Right, and that could be a good sign for investors looking for long-term growth.
But again, valuation is just one piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. You need to do your research and due diligence before making any investment decisions.
Now let's address the potential risks of investing in MUFG one last time.
Sure. Like we discussed before, one inherent risk for any financial institution is economic downturns.
Recessions and financial crises can have a big impact on a bank's profits, which can lead to a drop in their stock price.
Another thing to consider is the heavy regulation of the financial services industry.
Right. Any changes in those regulations, here in Japan or internationally, can affect MUFG's operations and profits.
And then there's the competition.
MUFG is up against some big players, both established banks and those new fintech companies.
They have to constantly adapt and innovate to stay competitive.
It's a dynamic industry, that's for sure.
So the bottom line is, should you invest in MUFG?
It's a decision that each investor has to make for themselves, based on their own goals, risk tolerance, and investment strategy.
We've given you a pretty in-depth look at MUFG, highlighting their strengths, their challenges, and what we think the future holds for them.
Now it's your turn to decide if this financial powerhouse is the right fit for your portfolio. So we've covered a lot about MUFG, but let's look a bit closer at some of their specific investments in technology. What really jumps out at you?
Well, besides their, general focus on digital transformation, one thing that comes to mind is this platform they have called MUFG Fundor. It's designed to make stock and business management easier for startups.
Interesting.
It shows that they're really trying to come up with practical tech solutions that are tailored to specific groups.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Their collaborations also seem to be a big part of their tech strategy. Can you talk about those, especially the international ones?
Oh, yeah, for sure. A good example is their partnership with Morgan Stanley. They teamed up to launch the Japan Inclusive Ventures Lab, or JIVL. It's all about supporting startups founded by women or people from diverse backgrounds. The goal is to help these businesses go global right from the start. It shows that MUFG understands how important diversity is for innovation, and they're actively trying to make the startup world more inclusive.
It's great to see them making an effort to make the tech sector more diverse. Now, let's go back to something we talked about earlier. MUFG's unique position within the Mitsubishi Keiretsu. How does that structure affect their operations and overall strategy?
Well, the Mitsubishi Keiretsu, as we mentioned, is this network of companies that are all interconnected and work together closely. This gives MUFG some big advantages, like having access to a huge network of customers, suppliers, and partners.
Right.
This close connection creates stability and encourages a long-term view, which you can see in MUFG's conservative approach to risk management and their focus on building strong, lasting relationships.
So being part of the Keiretsu makes them more stable and reinforces their long-term vision. Now let's talk about those recent acquisitions, Home Credit and Mandala Finance. What makes them strategic moves beyond just expanding their reach?
Well, both Home Credit and Mandala Finance are really focused on consumer lending, especially in Southeast Asia. This region is growing economically really fast, and there's a rising middle class, which means more demand for consumer credit.
Okay.
By acquiring these companies, MUFG is getting into a new market with a lot of potential for growth. It fits with their strategy of expanding into fast-growing areas while also diversifying their loan portfolio.
So they're making smart moves to take advantage of the growing consumer lending market in Southeast Asia. Now let's switch gears and talk about something a bit unexpected. Their investments in the space industry. Why would a financial institution like MUFG be interested in space exploration and technology?
Well, the space industry is predicted to be worth trillions of dollars in the next few decades. MUFG sees this as a chance to diversify their investments and get into a high-growth sector.
So it's a strategic bet on the future of space.
Exactly. Their investments in companies like Space One, which launches small satellites, and Astroscale Holdings, which focuses on space debris removal, show that they're not afraid to embrace new technology and support innovation.
Now let's talk about their efforts in regional revitalization here in Japan. What's driving that focus?
Japan has been dealing with a declining population and some economic stagnation in certain areas. MUFG recognizes that it's important to help these regional economies and revitalize communities. Their initiatives like MUIC Kansai, which is their innovation center in Osaka, are all about getting big companies and startups to work together to
Okay.
address social issues and create new business opportunities.
So they're contributing to the overall well-being of Japan. Finally, let's come back to their focus on ESG factors.
Yeah.
How do they incorporate those principles into their overall business strategy?
MUFG sees ESG as crucial to their long-term success. They believe that being sustainable and responsible is good for everyone involved: shareholders, customers, employees, and society as a whole.
It seems like ESG is at the core of their business philosophy.
Yeah, for sure. Their commitment shows in their ambitious environmental goals, their social responsibility programs, and their emphasis on ethical governance.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground with MUFG today. We've talked about their history, their financials, their acquisitions, their innovation efforts, their ESG initiatives, and even their investments in the space industry.
We've also looked at the potential risks and challenges they might face in this ever-changing global financial landscape.
We hope that this deep dive has given you a good understanding of MUFG and helped you gain some valuable insights to make informed investment decisions.
Remember, though, always do your research and due diligence before investing in anything.
If you want to learn more, you can visit MUFG's website or check out the resources we've linked in the show notes.
And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more deep dives on companies that are shaping the future. Let us know in the comments what other companies you'd like us to explore. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, happy investing.